Hello and welcome to our class for the section of, I believe it would be the 30th of May. And I'm going to bring up and start sharing the slide deck. And we are still going through the First Kings. And we're going to be looking at chapters 3 and 4. And a little bit of an overview, as always, before we maybe look at the narrative. Hopefully, you've covered 1 Kings chapters 1 and 2. It's been a little bit of a challenging start for young King Solomon, or Solomon, and he's had to contend with a usurper, his older brother, and has survived that. And had to end some old business. I think last class we talked about God serving out justice. It may take a while, but justice is clearly served. Go to the slide deck. I'm going to bring this a little bit more into the middle and reduce the slide a little bit so we can see it. We can now see an enormous kingdom that Solomon has, again, not only maintained, but grown, not through warfare, conquest, but through alliance that his father David put together. And one of the key alliances is with Tyre, the Phoenicians. We don't hear a whole lot anymore about the Philistines, but we have archaeological record that says that there was a thriving and ongoing relationship, trade especially, between Philistia, the five Philistine city-states, and the greater United Kingdom of Israel, and then on in the years of the northern Israel kingdom and the southern Judah, or the kingdom of Judah. And these become important ports, places of commerce and trade, which will become very important in the Solomon cycle, as we'll soon study in the chapters coming up. And so again, I will be soon retiring this very complex family chart of David. We are definitely now in the period of Solomon, the Solomonic rule, and he will have many wives, many concubines, as the scriptures will tell us. But all of this confusion and all of this complexity and all of this tragedy is now in the past. He alone rules. His mother, clearly the queen mother, as they would say, has still influence, but he is firmly in control of the kingdom. And his father David, as mentioned earlier, certainly fused together a kingdom by warfare and conquest. Solomon will expand it to its greatest extent through trade and political alliance. And again, we've had a couple of conversations. We'll really focus on how that Zion, David's city, formerly a Jebusite stronghold. The Jebusites controlled this. Yerushalayim is the Hebrew name, literally means of a peace, or the Yahu of peace, the Shalom. And it's very interesting that David chooses to name one of his sons Abi Shalom, or my father Shalom, or Salam, is the same root as Jerusalem, or of peace. And there's a very interesting tie between David historically and Zion, the Jebusite stronghold, and then going beyond that on into the formation of the greater Jerusalem capital, to include the great temple that Solomon will build. And so the temple, as we've described, is up a bit further north and east on a higher rise, Mount Moriah, not Zion, That's where the temple will be, and Solomon will, of course, build it. There's many, I'm going to try to shrink this down a little bit. There's many wonderful renderings that I think many good architects and scholars have put together to try to visualize what the Temple Mount looked like in Solomon's day. We have begun to find good archaeological work has been done finding these outer Evran walls of the temple of Solomon's day. And so we'll get into that specifically. That's come in the last 20 to 25 years. There, right by the Temple Mount currently, seeing the actual outer walls of Solomon's construction. And one thing to keep in mind that it says in our narrative today, and certainly the first part of chapter 3, it'll tell us that Solomon was so significant that Pharaoh wanted an alliance and gave to him one of his daughters. And that's just unheard of for the mighty Egyptian empire. The pharaohs never gave their daughters away in any alliance whatsoever. In fact, there's a famous correspondence between Amenhotep and the great emperor or king of Hatti, or the Hittites, and the Hittites ask for a daughter of Pharaoh to seal their alliance, and he just bluntly says that never happens in Egypt. And yet, oh my, how the times have changed. And so Piandaim the second, or Pianjim the second, was a high priest of Amun at Thebes in ancient Egypt from about 990 BC to 969, right at the time of Solomon's kingdom. And he was the de facto ruler of the south of the country, or what's called Lower Egypt. Egypt had fallen in such disarray and weakness that the upper and lower kingdoms, always fused together from time immemorial, had loosed apart. He married his sister, also his niece, and so again, very typical of the Pharaoh or Pharaonic family. And it is believed that this is the Pharaoh that Solomon formed a very strong alliance with, and it makes perfect sense if you're the weaker Pharaoh of the lower or the Delta Thebes on part of Egypt, then having a very strong alliance with a strong partner just in the land of Canaan makes perfect sense. And as the slide deck says here, Egypt was at a very weakened state at the time of Solomon's kingdom. It is very likely that having a strong alliance with the emerging Israelite state was a much needed buffer for Pharaoh. And so it makes perfect sense. And we'll get into in the coming weeks the archaeology that is so strong, that shows the built up strong citadels of Hatzor in the north, Megiddo in the middle, and Beersheba in the south, having the same gate structure and technology that the Egyptians had at this time. And it really seals from an evidence base the historicity, if you will, of our narrative, of our scriptures we're reading through today. And before I proceed, I'm going to take a little break and let Mike, maybe or whoever the facilitator is, have some comments on that, how God works through history, and at the right time, he's bringing this very strong alliance between Egypt and Israel. Imagine that. Go back to the time of the patriarchs coming into Egypt and then fleeing with the exodus of slaves, and now, oh my gosh, how things have changed now. Alliance partners, and of course that will be both good and bad, and we need to talk about that as time goes by. So I'll pause here a little bit and maybe have some good discussion. Okay, coming back on the slide deck, one of the things I always love to show is just the beauty of the current state of Israel. And certainly in the past, before many of the trees were cut down during the medieval age, during the Ottoman conquest, the Crusader conquest. Israel was just, it's hard to fathom how beautiful the land is, but today, incredibly beautiful. So I literally will come from Dan to Beersheba. And so this first picture is a picture of the land just north of the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake Tiberias, and you come into what's called the watershed of the Galil. And this is where many springs are fed from the snowpack coming off the snow of Mount Hermon and the Damascus range. And it's just absolutely beautiful. So we're way up in the north at what is called Dan, the area of Dan. And this is the headwaters of the Jordan, or the Jordan. And it is spectacular. And if you ever get a chance to go to Israel, please go up to Tel Dan and see the very northern edges, where you see this beautiful pure water coming from the snowmelt of the Damascus range in Syria. And then as we come down, there is the critical, not archaeological site, but the critical biblical site of Hatzor. And they have done a marvelous job of excavating that Canaanite stronghold, and it sits right where it needs to control all of the traffic coming and going north and south. And so a little bit south of Dan, but you can see the beautiful rolling hillsides through that area, many covered with beautiful trees now. In the forest, Israel plants millions of trees, I think, every year, gaining back the beautiful forests it once had. And now we're coming down even further from the side of what's called the Golan, and we're looking at Lake Tiberias, or the Lake of Galilee, and you're seeing the little bits of the Galil out to the west. This is on the east side, and of course the Sea of Galilee. And there is a lake side view. It's got both these beautiful stones and a little bit of sand, and it's a wonderful thing to see. And then here is a Capernaum, or Nafakum. Beautiful. The gardens that grow in Israel give Israel water. It's some of the most fertile land. It can grow anything. And one of the beautiful gardens there by Capernaum. And as we go a little bit further now over the Nazarite Ridge, or the Nazarene Ridge, you come into the Jezreel Valley, and some of the most fertile land in all of Israel through the Jezreel. And you will go further west, almost to the coast, and you see Mount Carmel, which is a fabulous, imposing ridge that sticks out, just jutting into the Mediterranean Sea, but all around, very lush, beautiful land, obviously a great place to grow crops, wheat, you name it. And as we come further on back and further south, we come into Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, the Western Wall, or Wailing Wall, one of the holiest sites for the Jewish people as they meditate and say their prayers. And beautiful, amazing place to be. And that is the actual Temple Mount, where both the first temple under Solomon and the second temple with the exiles coming back and then really built up under Herod was seen, and where Jesus, of course, and the Christians afterwards, after his resurrection, met. I love the Judean wilderness. Yeshua went into the wilderness after the temptation, and there he would fast for 40 days and then be tempted by the Shaitan. That's the real name of Satan. Satan's a title meaning the accuser, from the Hebrew Shaitan. And so here comes the accuser. And then a beautiful En-Gedi, the wonderful springs right by the side, the western side of the Dead Sea. Now we're looking into the Negev, that amazing desert land south of the Judean hills, the Dead Sea, and what an amazing place that is, almost 1,500 feet below sea level. And you can feel the pressure on you. It's a very strange feeling, but it's also very beautiful. Masada, there again, further south by the side of the Dead Sea, and just a wonderful cross geographic quick tour of Israel from north to south, from Dan to Beersheba. And so one of the things we wanted to cover is a very important moment in Solomon's life. It says that Givon, Adonai appeared to Solomon in a dream at night, and God said, "Tell me what I should give you." Solomon said, "You showed your servant David, my father, much grace as he lived before you honestly and righteously, having an upright heart with you. You preserved this great grace for him by giving him a son to sit on his throne, as is the case today. So now, Adonai, my God, you have made your servant king in the place of David, my father, but I am a mere child. I do not know how to lead. Moreover, your servant is among your people whom you chose, a great people, so numerous that they cannot be counted. Therefore, give your servant an understanding heart, able to administer justice to your people, so that I can discern between good and bad, for who is equal to judging this great people of yours?" And this is an amazing moment in his life as a young ruler. And he doesn't ask for wealth or riches or power or a long life or anything. He asks for wisdom, wisdom to give good rule, good justice to his people. And I'm going to take another break here and let Mike talk a little bit about perhaps how important it is to gain spiritual wisdom, not just biblical data points and all the amazing facts. I love all the facts, but it's got to produce something in you that produces spiritual insight or discernment. We have the Holy Spirit in us, and so we should be able to discern things, to figure out what is the best and noble way to go. So let's have some more conversations about that. And getting back to our slide deck, and then we're on to the narrative. What Solomon had said in making this request pleased Adonai. God said to him, "Because you have made this request, instead of asking long life or riches for yourself or your enemy's death, but rather asking for yourself understanding to discern justice, I'm doing what you requested. I'm giving you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has never been anyone like you, nor will there ever be anyone like you. I'm also giving you what you did not ask for, riches and honor greater than that of any other king throughout your life. More than that, if you will live according to my ways, obeying my laws and mitzvah, like your father David, I will give you a long life." And there's just such wisdom in seeking what is the good and right thing, and then not getting hung up about, am I being blessed this way or that way, but rather I'm doing what God wants me to do. And then the blessings come, and that's what's truly amazing. And so it may be good to take another little break here and to perhaps discuss, is it wrong to want to be blessed? I don't think so, but if we stay focused on that, we probably won't be very blessed at all. And what is the nature of being blessed by God? For Solomon, it would become very wise, very wealthy, and evidently a fairly long life. But in the end, I'm not sure if that meant that much to him as we read through, and we later will look at the book of Ecclesiastes. So maybe some talks on how does God appear to bless? Why does he bless the ways that he does? And sometimes it may not look like blessings. It may not even feel like blessings, but in hindsight, they're there is, through perhaps what you have to go through, some hard times, significant blessings. So a little time to talk about that. All right, hopefully some good discussions are going on. We're going to go right into the narrative and then move forward and have our lesson for today. 1 Kings chapter 3, Solomon formed an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, by marrying Pharaoh's daughter. He brought her into the city of David, where she lived, until he had finished building his own palace. The house of Adonai and the wall around Jerusalem, around Jerusalem. My tongue's not working today. The people, however, were still sacrificing on the high places because no house had yet been built for the name of Adonai. Solomon loved Adonai, living according to the regulations set forth by David, his father. Nevertheless, he sacrificed and made offerings on the high places. One time the king went to Givon to sacrifice there because that was the main high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar there. And so sometimes when you read, especially in the Kings, not so much a couple of references in the Samuel chapters, Samuel may be the prophet sacrificing here, if you're in the case of Saul, you're getting in trouble sacrificing where you shouldn't. But clearly, in the time of Samuel, he would sacrifice at Gilgal. He would sacrifice over at Ramah, and then I forget the third place. He would make this circuit, and so there were numerous. Shiloh, of course. He would make these circuits to be closer to the people where they could come in and sacrifice. That's still going on, even to the point of Solomon's early part of his reign. Why? Because there's not yet a temple built. And then what will happen is after the temple is built, all of these high places will be shut down. And this will be a bone of contention that goes on, and the prophets will speak out. And one of the issues it will say to some of the kings is, and they allow the high places to continue to sacrifice. And so people would not go into Jerusalem. They would sacrifice locally. And we get it, right? I mean, it's hard to go all the way into Jerusalem. It takes a lot of effort, but that's really what God wants. And so the narrative is saying, okay, it's still going on this way, but soon it will be always and only at the temple. But Givon was a really important place of sacrifice. It's mentioned in the Samuel accounts. And so here is Solomon doing, I'm sure, what his father previously had done, and having the high priest and the priests sacrificing there. And so he has a huge amount of sacrifice that goes on. And at Givon, Adonai appeared to Solomon in a dream at night. God said, "Tell me, what should I give you?" Solomon said, "You showed your servant David, my father, much grace, as he lived before you honestly and righteously, having an upright heart with you. You preserved his great grace for him by giving him a son on his throne, as is the case today. So now, Adonai, my God, you have made your servant king in the place of David, my father, but I'm your child. I do not know how to lead. Moreover, your servant is among your people whom you chose, a great people, so numerous they cannot be counted. Therefore, give your servant an understanding heart, able to administer justice to your people, so I can discern between good and bad, for who is equal to judging this great people of yours?" And of course, as I read earlier in the slide deck, God is very pleased with that. And we'll pick it up since I've already read it here. Solomon awoke and found it had been a dream. But he went to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of Adonai, offered up burnt offerings and peace offerings. He also made a feast for all his servants. After this, there came to the king 2 women who were prostitutes. So he has this amazing event that happens in his life. God administers to him or gives to him this great gift. And it's not but a few days later that here comes the test. After presenting themselves to him, one of the women said, "My lord, I and this woman live in the same house, and when she was in the house, I gave birth to a baby. 3 days after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth. We were there together. There was no one else with us in the house except the two of us. During the night, this woman's child died because she rolled over on top of it. So she got up in the middle of the night, took my son from next to me while your servant was sleeping, and put it in her arms, and she laid her dead child in my arms. When I awoke in the morning to feed my child from my breast, there it was dead. When I took a closer look later in the morning, why wasn't my son at all? No, the one I gave birth to, not the one I gave birth to. The other one broke in. No, the living one is my son, and the dead one, is your son. The first one said, no, the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son. This is how they spoke in the presence of the king. And this is this is the classic he said, in this case, she said. And what evidence is there? We don't know. He's going to have to discern by the very words coming out of each of these women's mouths, and more importantly, their hearts. Then the king said, this woman says, the living one is my son, your son is the dead one. Well, the other one says, no, the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son. Bring me a sword. So they brought a sword to the king. My goodness. King said, cut cleanly, I think is what it's supposed to say, the living child in two, give half to the one and half to the other. At this, the king to whom the living child belonged addressed the king because she felt so strongly towards her son. Oh, my lord, give her the living child. You mustn't kill it. But the other woman said, it will be neither yours nor mine. Divide it up. Then the king answered, give the living child to the first woman. Don't kill it, because she is the mother. All Israel heard of the decision the king had made and held the king in awe, for they saw that God's wisdom was in him, enabling him to render justice properly. I want to take a break here, and let's have a discussion. What's amazing about Solomon's use of discernment here? All the facts are laid before him, and no one could figure out who's lying, who's not lying. They're all saying, it's my child. How in the world do you get past that? Well, you get past that by spiritual discernment. So let's have a good discussion about what does that mean? How does it show up in your life? How can we help one another in our relationships? Spiritual wisdom, spiritual discernment. All right, we're back, and we're going to get through chapter 4. It's not very long, but it does say something very important. I want to make a very important point as we go through it. A lot of good Hebrew names here. King Solomon was king over all Israel, and there were his high officials: Azariah, the son of Tzadok, the Kohen or priest, actually the high priest; Elikoref, Nakiah, the son of Shishah, secretaries; Yehoshaphat, the son of Achilud, the secretary of state; Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, commander of the army; Eviatar, Kohanim, also priest; Azariah, the son of Natan, a chief administrator; Zavud, the son of Natan, the king's trusted counselor. I find that very interesting. This is the same great prophet Natan or Nathan that confronted David and was with David through his whole life and stayed alive at least long enough for Solomon to come rightfully to the throne, and two of his sons are trusted counselors to Solomon. Akshar, in charge of the palace; Adoram, the son of Avde, in charge of forced labor. That's a very important point, forced labor. Solomon had 12 officers over all Israel who were in charge of providing food and supplies. This is called corvée labor, corvée supply, for the king and his household. Each one was in charge of provisions for 1 month out of the year. They were the son of Hur in the hills of Ephraim, the son of Deker in Makatz, Abim, Beit Shemesh, Elion Beit Hanan, the son of Hesed in Arabat. He was also in charge of Socho, in the territory of Hefer. The son of Abinadab and all the area of Dor had Tephat, the daughter of Sholomon, and his wife. Aha, so some of his officials are also his sons-in-law. Ba'anah, the son of Aklud, and Tanakh and Megiddo, and all of Bethshan, Bethzaran, below Yisrael, from Bethshan to Avdukoel, as far as Yokan, the son of Giver, Romat Gilad. He was in charge of the villages of Yair, the son of Manasseh, and Gilad, and in charge of the region of the Argob and Bashan, 60 large cities with walls and bronze bars. Achinadev, the son of Iddo, and Machinaim, Achimatz, and Naphtali. He also took Basmat, the daughter of Sholomon, as his wife. There we go again, another son-in-law. Anai, the son of Hushai, and Asher, and Elat. Hoshaphat, the son of Paruka, and Ishkar. Shimei, the son of Eli, and Benjamin. Giver, the son of Uri, in the land of Gilad. The country of Sechon, king of the Emori, and Og, king of Bashan. Over all these, there was one administrator in the land. Yehuda and Israel were as numerous as sand grains on the seashore. They ate, drank, and enjoyed themselves. Well, that's really good. And if you read through this, you kind of get the idea that, wow, that's really cool. He's got the different parts of the land divided kind of among the 12 tribes of Israel, sort of. But there's one tribe that it appears doesn't bring or have to bring forced labor or food, and that's Yehuda, Judah. And many things barely kept the kingdom of David together. Many times there was rebellion, and many times the refrain was, what part do we have in you, David? And, to your tents, Israel. So Israel to the north, Judah to the south. And right here, we're going to start to see how this has infuriated the corvée labor and the forced conscription of labor and food affects all of the other tribes except Judah, Yehuda. And this, along with many other things, will become a rupture point in the future. Hopefully this has been a good class. Please read ahead to 1 Kings 5 and 6. And thank you so much for participating in the class today. We're going to go ahead and start stopping all of the recording here. All right, have a great weekend, guys.